All right, welcome to Empowering Nurses, another YouTube podcast. And today we have Aaron and, of course, Omid. So, today I just want to introduce Aaron. He's a CRNA student, he's in his first year right now. And basically, we wanted to get him on this podcast just to help other. We have nurses in a Discord right now that are interested in going to CRNA school, and we wanted to get them as much value as we can. So we're going to be asking Aaron some questions, getting to know him a little bit. How did he do it? What was the process like? What's his drive? And yeah, Aaron, what's up, brother? How you doing?
How's it going, guys?
Great,
Yeah,
great, great.
yeah, and I know a lot of nursing students want to be CRNAs one day. So this is a super important podcast, and we really appreciate Aaron coming on today and giving us some education.
Yeah, no problem.
Aaron, so where is your CRNA school right now?
So I'm in
Where are you living?
Northeastern PA at University of Scranton. It's a 3-year doctorate program. It's relatively new to them. You can find master's programs throughout the country, but most of them are phasing out. Most of them are going to doctorate degrees right now. So
Okay, okay. And what got you interested? Did you know you wanted to be a CRNA the whole time starting nursing school? Did it come to you later on or
yeah, I knew I wanted to do CRNA. I started off actually as a bio major, thinking I'd go into PA school or something, medicine, and then working to get the hours to become a PA. I was an anesthesia tech and
Mm.
got to work with the CRNAs, anesthesiologists, and I was like, this is what I want to do. So I switched degrees and went back, did a 1-year bachelor's of nursing program, and then just kept my eye on the prize and went for critical care, and then kept applying for CRNA schools and got in.
Can you,
love that, love
yeah,
that.
can you talk a little bit about how you got into the ICU? Did you get in right after graduation, and then can you kind of explain your ICU experience and how it was?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to get right into the ICU right out of nursing school. Sometimes that's hard to get by.
Mhm.
But that was one of the things when I was looking for a job I wanted to do. So I actually applied to it's a cardiac ICU, didn't know surgical, but everything medical within cardiology. And yeah, I mean, it can be very difficult for people to get into the ICU right off as a new grad. So they do. A lot of the kids I go to school with actually were med surg nurses or things before that just to get into the ICU.
Right. And I know, like personally, I started in the ICU last year in May. A very
Mhm.
difficult time to start in the ICU, right?
Right.
And I had a lot of difficulties, whether it was like lack of staffing, if it was a management issue. There's a lot of issues in the ICU. Did you face any issues in the ICU, and why did you decide to apply to a CRNA program now versus a year from now versus 2 or 3 years from now?
Yeah, I've met some challenges. I didn't start in an ICU with COVID. I actually started
Right.
what a year before COVID then. So I was only a nurse about 2.5 years before I got into CRNA school. But yeah, I mean the ICU is a tough place. Nursing's a tough place going in as a new grad. Uh, you meet some people that aren't too fond of it's a mix. I'm sure you run into the same people no matter where you go, but it's uh how do I say this? Like it's just hard for people to educate you nicely in a way that you
Right.
accept, I guess. So that was
Yeah,
one
I
of the
get you.
roughest things I ran into. So, and then what was the second part of it? I'm sorry.
So yeah, why did you decide to apply to CRNA schools now versus like did you want to leave because of COVID? Was there like a certain thing that you wanted to leave the ICU for? Was there a reason?
No, no, I think COVID would have pushed. If I didn't get into school, I think COVID would have pushed me out of the ICU, maybe to like a procedural area or something, just to get away from bedside nursing.
Right.
But I just always had my eye on CRNA schools. So I mean, nothing stood between me and going, and I was strategic. I only applied to maybe 4 or 5 schools, so I had a narrow window of who I was looking at, and I was very strategic about who I
I kn
reached out to.
I know a big question that nursing students are have. They're intimidated by CRNA school. What type of grades do you need really good grades to get into CRNA school? What type of grades do you need in nursing
You
school?
need a
What
minimum of 3.0. I'm not going to say you have to be a 4.0 student or anything. I mean, I wasn't. I was a three. I was pretty. I think it was a 3.3 across the board, science, nursing, everything. So you didn't need anything too crazy, but a 3.0 is a minimum. And a lot of competitive schools will really stick to at least a 3.25, depending on how competitive the school is, depending on what
What in
school you're
your
looking at.
application do you think stood out? What do we need in our application to
Yeah.
stand out as a applicant?
Just crazy experience is what I call it. Like
Yep.
working at big name hospitals, and that's what these hospitals pride themselves on, is you using their name on their resume. So working at a community hospital won't stand out as much as working at like Duke's cardiac surgery ICU or something.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of things. I was obviously on the road to CRNA school myself before I decided to switch paths. I
Mhm.
think a huge thing, level one trauma, right? Major. And then the patients you're taking care of, like making sure
Yeah,
you have your experience with your pressors, right? Making sure you
yeah,
have experience with sedation, procedural, like there you can be either surgical or cardiac or medical,
exactly.
whatever, neuro, whatever. But making sure you're working with a bunch of sedation, bunch of pressors, and a bunch of special equipment like
Yeah,
ECMO
you
monitors.
hit on it. The big thing is skills is what they go on, because I
Right.
work with a lot of nurses. They actually came from a cancer ICU. They didn't do
Okay.
anything surgical or anything cardiac, but they have their skills down. And yeah, especially in CRNA school, you got to be able to know your meds, know your doses, know what you're using it for, and all the different equipment that's out there that you may run into and may have to manage one day when you're the only one in the OR.
Right. Okay. So then, can you talk a little bit about your interview process for CRNA school? You said you applied to 5 or 6
Yeah.
schools. Can you talk a little bit about that? Did you get accepted to all of them? How did the interview process go with them?
Yeah. So COVID actually put it the most recent I applied 2 years in a row. The first year I only applied to one school and where I ended up getting in this year.
Hmm.
And it was in person. They bring you in 8 a.m. You do a 10 to 20 question CCRN type quiz where they're just asking about critical care questions. And then you have the interview with the faculty. And then depending on the school, usually there's a sim or an essay you might have to write, just a personality. But usually my thought is once you get invited for an interview, you impress them on paper. So now
Right.
you just have to impress them as a person. So you don't have to go there and talk about all your experience anymore. Now it's just being a good person. And that's the best advice I could give is if you get an interview, they liked you on paper. So now you just have to be the person that they want for their program. And that's going to be part of the family for what, 3+ years that you're
Love
with.
that.
Well,
I love
Right.
that.
So let's talk about once you're accepted. Okay.
mhm.
How was that experience? How was your first semester? How are things going right now?
The first semester wasn't so bad. It was part time, about 6 credits, so I luckily was able to work. This semester, I'm in at 16 credits. I got rid of my job. I will probably take a short, maybe travel contract over Christmas just to get a little bit of money. But for the most part, there's most schools in the country that you can't work when you're in the program. Sometimes you're lucky enough to get like short semesters. Like my first semester was only 7 credits. You could work a little bit, but the workload's pretty intensive. And then once you get into clinical, you can't run into work and having clinical because you're in the OR 30 to 40 hours a week and trying to manage a job on that. And then your school, because of their accreditation, has to worry about when the last time you worked in relation to the next time you have clinical. So if you throw work in there and they get in trouble, they're not going to be pretty happy about that. So um, it's manageable. It's nursing school a little bit with a little bit of medicine there. So it's a mix of a medical student and a nursing student all over again. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's so no working while in school.
none. Yeah, you got to use. I'm
That's
trying to get
interesting.
a 4 week contract over winter break.
Yeah, where do you want to work in the ICU?
Yeah,
What do
I'll
you
go back to because I did a travel contract right before school started, and I'll go back and work there again.
Okay, okay. Well, all pays off in the end, like
Yeah, yeah. I mean, most of us and CRNA is a pretty competitive thing, so it's in our hands when you get at the end. So most of us have job offers, even though we're only in our first year. They're offering jobs, and they'll pay for our school right now.
and talk a little bit. I know what drives a lot of people to going to CRNA school or becoming a CRNA is like the money. Can you talk about that part?
I
Like
mean,
starting out, how much would you make? Like going on, how much could you eventually make?
yeah, I mean, it depends on what state you practice in. So, I mean, in Maryland, I heard starting at Hopkins could be like 170 with a little bit of a sign-on bonus, which I think was like 30 or 40,000. But The money's out there. It depends on where you go. California, of course, is always going to be way over 200,000 just because of cost of living and type of work out there. And then depending on the state, if it's an opt out, some CRNAs can practice on their own without a physician over them. So then they can bill for their own. And it's something called 1099 where they're a contracted CRNA. And that's unreal money. I mean, that's probably over 300,000.
Wow.
Right. Can you talk a little bit about finances of schooling? Obviously, CRNA school can be expensive if you go to a big school. Um,
Yeah.
and so, how are you managing right now?
Yeah, I live a little bit off of savings, but a lot of it's student loans. I mean,
Right.
you're investing in your future here. I mean, it's scary the amount of money you see taken out in a student loan, but it's all for the drive at the end, I guess. So
Risk reward.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. As long as you make it through, it's one of those few professions you'll pay off your student loan at the end.
Right.
And
So
there's some people that don't make it through.
Yeah, I mean, you can look these statistics up on your school. There's a tuition rate, I think it's called, and it's the percentage of people in a class that didn't make it through.
Mhm. And is it like in nursing school where you have to get like a certain percentage, like passing like over a 75%, 70%?
Yeah, it's an 86 for us. You have to have an 86 or better to make it through in your anesthesia courses. So if you have an you basically need a B or better, and a B is an 86 in this program. So
Are there retakes?
I don't want to find out. I don't know.
yeah.
I'm gonna guess it's a no, but I'm sure you could talk to him because these courses only happen once a year. So you would have to fall behind into the basically the next class behind you.
Yeah.
Awesome. So can you talk a little bit about the hardest part of your journey, whether it was nursing school, whether it was being in the ICU or now in your program? Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think the hardest part in the journey is just getting a setup to apply for school. So probably in the actual nursing part of my career, getting out of nursing school, getting your skills down just to be a good critical care nurse. But at the same time, while trying to learn all that, trying to make networking connections with people who will write you letters of recommendation when you want to go to school, or physicians that you connect with at work that'll write you a recommendation for school. It's just, and then you got to balance your life in there just to, kind of be social and actually have a life. So I think that's the hardest part is just always keep an eye on the prize at the end.
How's your social life doing?
In school, it's barely there.
Yeah.
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 My classmates are my friends. That's what I got right now.
Mhm.
Great.
Mhm. And what motivates you to get through these tough times? Like, what really drives you to get through these tough times? Not having a social life, under financial stress, you have to get over at 86% in your classes. That's a lot of, like, stress and, pressure.
Yeah, it's
How
just
are
a
you getting
work-life balance. I know that's at the end. I mean,
Yeah.
you never hear of an unhappy CRNA that you meet. You never hear of them leaving their profession or anything. They all love their job, and
So you're
it's
working for that end goal.
I'm working. I'm in it for the long haul.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what a
So
lot of us, forget, that it's the long run that it
Yeah, and
goes.
especially through COVID, you can get pretty sidetracked with the money from traveling and things like that. But eventually, 5 years from now, maybe it might not be there no more. So you just got to remember what you had your eyes on before, and don't and just put the blinders on and keep
Oh, yeah.
going.
so I have a question. Most people know my passion is burnout. Okay. One of my huge passions is burnout and helping prevent nursing burnout. Do you feel that you would have gone down this same path and experienced the stresses you have throughout your whole career if it wasn't for CRNA money, if it wasn't for that end goal of the CRNA big dollars? Do you think you would have gone the same direction?
You know, I don't like to say that I was in it for CRNA for money because I wasn't.
Right.
I like the type of work that they do. It's different than managing as like an acute care nurse practitioner or bedside nurse. So I think I would have always went to CRNA just because of what I knew the type of work was like as well. It's the type of work I would like. I mean, 1-to-1 in an OR, one of the most controlled scenarios you can get in healthcare is in the OR. So
Mhm.
it's just a great workplace to be, whether you're a nurse or a CRNA, a circulating nurse, a scrub nurse. So yeah, I think even if I became burnt out, I still would have went CRNA.
Right, and my uncle's a CRNA. He's been
Yeah,
a CRNA for 35 years, and I mean, he loves his profession. Like you said, I haven't met an unhappy CRNA. But he said the same thing you did. He didn't want to be in the ICU anymore. He didn't want to have the backbreaking labor, right, of bedside nursing, and he wanted to go out and be independent, work independently. And the money was a secondary thing. Obviously, the
right.
money's really nice. The money's great, but the first thing is he wanted to be independent and he wanted to continue his career and his education. So I think that's great.
Yeah, CRNA is one of the most autonomous positions as a
Right.
nurse you could probably get. So I know it's kind of cliche to say because when you're in an interview, everybody's like, "Oh, I love the autonomy," but
Yeah.
it really is different when you're a nurse anesthetist versus a nurse practitioner. The autonomy you get, I mean, y- just being in the OR is just like a different uh, field of nursing.
Right.
So, and fun fact, the first one to give anesthesia was a nurse. So,
Exactly. Right. So I guess we can wrap things up. The last question that we have is, can you give a piece of advice to our listeners? Any piece of advice that you find that was the most important for you throughout your career?
yeah, like I told you earlier, just keep your eye on what you want. Set your goal. Always have a 1 year plan, 5 year plan, and try to stick to it as much as you can. I mean,
Blinders.
yeah, you got to put the blinders on. Don't get distracted, especially right now. Travel nursing is, I mean, I see the dollars in my email all the time, and it's like, wow, what am I doing? So the money's out there, but you don't know how long it's going to be there. And do you want to be doing bedside for the rest of your life too? And I'm not saying there are people that don't want to, but yeah, just make your goals, set them, and go for them.
Great. That sounds amazing. Amazing advice.
Yeah, so Aaron, thank you for coming on and giving us so much value. I hope other nursing students come on, listen to this because this was unreal. Having a CRNA student in here, giving us right upfront value. You don't get that often from other places. And I really believe also nursing school should have like people like you coming in and talking to the classes and yeah, but we're getting it here on Empowering Nurses YouTube. Let's go.
Yeah, and I do think I do last thing. I do think that nursing students need to explore, and this is a great way for them to explore. I didn't really have the opportunity to talk to a CRNA other than my uncle, but even then, like I'm not super close to him, so I didn't have the insight. And that insight was something that could drive a lot of nursing students to go towards this path. And I think CRNAs and nurse anesthetists are a great profession and ones that are advocating for autonomy, which is super important, whether it be for themselves or the whole DNP school in general. I do think it's super important. So thank you, Aaron. Thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
See ya.